The HOA president was trespassing on my private property at 6:30 a.m., screaming about my illegal boat while standing on a dock that technically belonged to me. What she didn't know was that every single drop of water she kept calling community property was actually mine. But before I destroyed her entire world with one legal document, let me tell you how a power-hungry real estate agent picked the wrong veteran to mess with. Linda Chen thought she owned our lake, designer heels clicking against weathered cedar planks, waving cease and desist papers like battle flags while her sickeningly sweet perfume mixed with honest lake air. This floating junkyard disappears by Thursday, Patterson, or my lawyer turns your military pension into my legal fees. The woman had apparently confused confidence with competence, a mistake that would cost her everything she thought she controlled. Have you ever watched someone dig their own grave with a gold-plated shovel? Drop a comment about your worst HOA nightmare and stick around, because this story gets so much better. I'm Jake Patterson, 49, retired Navy logistics officer, who thought he'd found peace on a quiet Colorado lake. Wrong. My great-uncle Walter left me this modest cabin on what everyone assumed was just another community lake, surrounded by a dozen retirement homes. Nice neighbors, beautiful water, perfect spot to restore the 1985 Sea Ray I'd been rebuilding for 3 years. Every chrome fitting, every inch of fiberglass, lovingly brought back to life during long weekends that smelled like marine varnish and possibility. Then Linda moved in 4 houses down. White Tesla, white veneers, white lies. The woman sold luxury real estate in Denver and treated our modest lake community like her personal kingdom, awaiting proper management. Within 3 weeks, she'd maneuvered herself into the HOA presidency. Amazing how that works when you're the only person desperate enough to want the job. Our first encounter should have been a warning. I was tuning the engine on my dock when she approached in heels completely inappropriate for wooden planks. "Oh, you must be the military man. I hope you understand we maintain certain aesthetic standards here." The way she said aesthetic standards dripped with the kind of condescension that made 20 years of dealing with Navy bureaucrats look pleasant. But here's where it gets interesting. Linda's obsession with my boat wasn't really about boats at all. She filed the first violation notice on a Tuesday. Official letterhead, legal threats, daily fines until my oversized recreational vessel disappeared from community waters. The woman had apparently appointed herself admiral of a fleet she didn't command, regulating waters she didn't own. Military training teaches you to gather intelligence before reacting. So, instead of getting angry, I got curious. Who was Linda Chen? And what didn't she know about Uncle Walter's gift that might change this game entirely? Because here's the thing about people who abuse power they think they have. They never bother checking if that power actually exists. Linda didn't waste time escalating. Emergency HOA meeting, Wednesday at 2 p.m., when working people couldn't attend. Classic power play, but I showed up anyway with my green Navy notebook and coffee that smelled better than her overpriced perfume choking her pristine living room. Glass tables everywhere, white leather furniture designed to intimidate visitors into not touching anything. She'd gathered her usual supporters, 3 retirees who nodded at everything, plus her husband Brad, lurking nervously in the corner. "Ladies and gentlemen," Linda announced, opening her laptop with prosecutorial precision, "we have a situation threatening our entire community's character. 20 slides about my boat." The woman had photographed my Sea Ray from bizarre angles, low shots making it look like an aircraft carrier, wide shots somehow making 30 feet of restored fiberglass appear to consume the entire lake. Evil talent, but definitely talent. "Mr. Patterson's vessel exceeds size restrictions and creates navigation hazards," she pronounced vessel, like it was a social disease. "Furthermore, engine noise disrupts our peaceful atmosphere during early morning hours." I documented every accusation while she performed this Academy Award audition. My old chief used to say, "Patterson, when someone's digging their own grave, don't grab the shovel, just hand them a bigger one." When her presentation ended, I raised my hand politely. "Ma'am, professional quality work, but I have questions. Could you clarify these size restrictions? I've read our covenants thoroughly and can't find specific boat length limits." Her realtor smile tightened. "It's clearly implied in aesthetic standards." "Implied? Interesting. Second question. Brad's got that cigarette boat plus 2 jet skis, combined length roughly equivalent to my single vessel, correct? But wait. It gets better. I'd spent that morning at City Hall, and bureaucrats love helping veterans navigate red tape. Fascinating discovery at the permit office today. Brad's dock extension, no application on file. Municipal code violation requiring immediate remediation. Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish in a boat well. How dare you investigate? Just following your lead on community standards, ma'am. Due diligence and equal enforcement. Betty Morrison's ancient Buick interrupted Linda's sputtering. Betty, 74, taught high school English for 4 decades and could dismantle teenage arguments with surgical precision. Linda never stood a chance. Sorry I'm late, dear. Betty bustled in with homemade cookies, making Linda's store-bought ones look like cardboard. I was admiring Jake's boat. Reminds me when people built things to last instead of impress. Then Betty leaned close, whispering just loud enough for everyone. Walter had boxes of old papers in that basement. Legal documents, surveys, interesting history. Might be worth exploring. The flash of panic across Linda's face wasn't subtle. It was neon sign obvious. You know what I learned that day? Bullies who abuse official power are only strong when you don't know the rules better than they do. But something told me Linda's PowerPoint was just the opening act. The real show was about to begin, and she had no idea what she'd started. Linda didn't appreciate having her bluff called. Within a week, she'd escalated from neighborhood theater to bringing in outside muscle. The city inspector showed up Thursday morning, clipboard ready, wearing the expression of someone who'd seen too many petty disputes. Got a complaint about dock safety violations. Anonymous tip. Anonymous, my ass. Linda's Tesla was parked with perfect sight lines to my property, her silhouette visible behind tinted windows like some suburban spy. Rodriguez spent 2 hours measuring, photographing, testing every bolt. When he finished, he shook his head. Everything's up to code. Better than code, actually. Whoever built this knew their business. He glanced toward Linda's car. Between you and me, Mr. Patterson, I get lots of these calls. Usually means someone's got personal problems they're trying to make official. That afternoon brought an envelope taped to my door. Petition from concerned residents demanding immediate action regarding unsafe watercraft. 7 signatures led by Linda's flowing script, followed by Brad's nervous scrawl. But the interesting part wasn't who signed, it was the wording describing me as transient resident with temporary military benefits, bringing unstable elements to our established community. The woman was broadcasting her prejudices in legal language. My phone started ringing. Betty, then Phil Rodriguez from 2 doors down, then Mrs. Patterson across the lake. All had received visits from Linda asking pointed questions about my background, whether they felt safe with my boat in the water. She's telling people you're some PTSD case, Betty reported, teacher voice sharp with indignation. Says military people are unpredictable, and your boat is probably psychological compensation. The pure ugliness hit like a slap. This wasn't about boats or community standards. This was about Linda's prejudices against anyone not fitting her narrow vision of acceptable neighbors. That evening, I sat with beer and laptop, diving into public records. If Linda wanted to play investigator, 2 could play. What I found was fascinating. Brad Chen, city council wannabe, had been using HOA funds to pay his brother's landscaping company. $18,000 over 2 years for emergency improvements, never completed. Plus, Linda's real estate license had 2 official complaints, one for misrepresenting properties, another for aggressive tactics. Phil knocked around 8 with more beers and grim news. Phil's a contractor who built half our docks. 40 years of dealing with people's fantasies. Linda came by my shop today. Wanted me to inspect your dock, find something wrong. When I said it was solid as Gibraltar, she offered to pay for more thorough examination. But here's what really caught my attention. She's been asking about your uncle. Property boundaries, water rights, legal affairs. Got real interested when I mentioned Walter was secretive about documents. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If Linda wanted to dig into my background, I'd explore Walter's legacy. The basement Betty mentioned was calling, and something told me Uncle Walter's secrets might hold surprises, making Linda's presentations look like kindergarten art projects. You see, the best defense is superior battlefield knowledge. Time to explore terrain Linda didn't know existed. But first, let me tell you about the morning that brought the scent of rain on pine needles, and the first clue this fight was about to shift in ways she couldn't imagine. Linda's third escalation arrived with lawyer letterhead and threats designed to make normal people fold faster than house cards in hurricanes. Thick envelope, expensive courier, honest-to-God legal papers demanding my boat's removal, 5,000 in damages, permanent injunction preventing disruption of community harmony with oversized watercraft. Bradley Morrison, her downtown shark, had crafted legal fiction making my restored Sea Ray sound like floating garbage. Navigation hazards in public waters, noise pollution during quiet hours, visual blight inconsistent with neighborhood character. But the real kicker was page 4. They were claiming adverse possession rights based on 30 years of continuous community use. Linda wasn't just regulating my boat, she was attempting to steal my lake through technicalities that would make Wild West claim jumpers proud. My daughter Emma called within hours, voice mixing concern with exasperation I remembered from her teenage years. "Dad, what's happening up there? Brad Chen's wife friended me on Facebook. Spent 20 minutes messaging about your adjustment issues." That crossed a line. Targeting me was one thing, but dragging Emma into Linda's psychological warfare meant total war had been declared. "Emma, how'd you like helping your old man with research?" 3 hours later, Emma arrived with laptop, Thai food, and determined expression inherited from her mother. Kitchen table became command central, surrounded by takeout containers filling the cabin with basil and chili scents. "I've been digging into Linda's background," Emma announced, pulling up spreadsheets that would impress Navy logistics. "This woman has patterns. 3 different neighborhoods, always targeting single men or anyone not fitting her vision. But Dad, the real treasure was in Walter's basement. Midnight, boxes of documents dating to the 1960s, meticulously organized in Walter's careful handwriting. Property surveys, tax records, correspondence, water rights applications. The man kept everything. The breakthrough came in a manila folder marked Lake Acquisition, 1962-1978. Inside were deeds, contracts, payment records telling an incredible story. "Dad, look at this," Emma's voice tight with excitement. "Uncle Walter didn't just buy lakefront property, he bought the lake itself." The documents were crystal clear once you knew how to read them. When Pinewood Development went bankrupt in 1963, Walter had quietly purchased not just his cabin lot, but every parcel, including water rights. Deed by deed, year by year, assembling ownership of the entire lakebed, water column, all navigation privileges, all waters, improvements thereon, and exclusive navigation privileges in perpetuity. Walter owned every drop of water Linda kept calling community property. But wait until you hear what happened when I called Jennifer Walsh, the property lawyer Betty recommended. "Mr. Patterson," Jennifer said after reviewing documents, "if this is accurate, we're not discussing HOA violations anymore. We're talking about 30 years of trespassing on private property." The irony was delicious. Linda had spent months threatening to control my use of community waters, when every drop belonged to me. She'd been standing on my dock, screaming about my boat in my lake, threatening lawsuits for using my own property. "What does this mean practically?" I asked. "It means every dock, boat slip, swimming area exists on your private property by grace and tolerance. The HOA has zero authority over lake activities because they don't own any part of the lake." Through my window, Linda's Tesla pulled into her driveway. Power suit, probably headed to realtor meetings where she described herself as community leader, protecting property values. If only she knew whose property she was trying to protect. But here's where this story takes a turn nobody saw coming. "There's more," Jennifer continued. "Walter filed preliminary conservation easement paperwork but never completed it. Suggests he wanted protecting the lake's natural state while maintaining control. Pieces falling into place. Walter's simple lifestyle, hermit reputation, mysterious resources. He'd been quietly stewarding natural treasure while letting community enjoy it informally. Legally, I could ban every boat, close every dock, prohibit water access by anyone other than myself. Today, or," Jennifer paused for effect, "use this strategically." The coffee had gone cold, but I didn't care. 30 years of community assumptions were about to collide with 40 years of quiet legal planning. "Jennifer, I need time thinking about this." "Take all the time you want, but remember, knowledge is only power when you know how to use it. Something tells me Linda's not done escalating." She was right. Linda had declared war on someone she thought was just another retiree she could bully into submission. She had no idea she'd picked a fight with the person legally owning everything she was trying to control. Time to see how far she'd push before learning how spectacularly she'd miscalculated. The next 48 hours felt like preparing for naval operations. Instead of logistics and supply chains, I was coordinating lawyers, environmental specialists, and surprisingly cunning neighbors who'd been waiting years for someone to take Linda down. Jennifer arrived Wednesday with reinforcements. David Kim, environmental lawyer specializing in water rights, and Admiral Sarah Rodriguez, my old JAG buddy who'd retired to Denver and owed me favors from our Kosovo days. Sarah examined Walter's documents and whistled low. Patterson, your uncle handed you the legal equivalent of nuclear weapons. Question is, do you want leveling cities or removing one annoying dictator? We spread everything across my dining room: surveys, deeds, environmental reports, growing documentation of Linda's increasingly desperate behavior, strong coffee and focused intensity that comes when smart people tackle complex problems. Here's what we know, Jennifer began, pointing to David's color-coded map. Jake owns 100% of the lake: bed, water column, navigation rights, everything. Every dock exists by his permission. Every boat launches with his tolerance. Every property owner has been trespassing on his water for 30 years. David leaned forward, environmental expertise adding dimensions. But here's the beautiful part. Walter's conservation research shows this lake is pristine. No pollution, no invasive species, perfect ecosystem balance. Jake could create conservation easements, protecting environment while maintaining community access. Sarah, ever the strategist, was thinking 3 moves ahead. The question isn't what you can do legally, it's what you should do practically. Linda's escalating because she thinks she's dealing with normal neighbor disputes. Time showing her she's been playing checkers while you inherited chess sets. Emma had driven up with laptop and determined expression she gets when someone's unfair to people she cares about. She'd been monitoring Linda's social media campaign, documenting every lie and exaggeration. Dad, look at this. Screen turned toward us. Linda's posting in regional HOA groups, painting you as unstable veteran terrorizing peaceful communities. 3 other HOA presidents offering to testify about dangers of letting military people live in residential areas. But you know what? That actually helped our case. The pure ugliness hit like slaps. This wasn't about boats or standards. This was Linda's prejudices against anyone not fitting her vision, turned into crusades, recruiting allies, sharing her twisted perspectives. That helps us, Sarah observed with prosecutorial calculation. Discrimination based on military status violates federal fair housing laws. She's not just wrong about property rights. She's creating civil rights violations. Phil arrived with sandwiches and updates from his contractor network. Linda's husband got permits for major dock expansion, boat lift handling 40-foot yachts. Guest size restrictions don't apply to people named Chen. Betty followed with apple pie and intelligence networks that would impress intelligence agencies. 5 families ready testifying about Linda's harassment. Plus, surprisingly, the Williams family Linda thought were supporters. We developed what Sarah called strategic revelation timelines. Phase 1, let Linda continue escalating while documenting everything. Phase 2, reveal property ownership at maximum impact. Phase 3, implement fair lake agreements protecting everyone except Linda from future abuse. Key is timing, Jennifer explained. We want Linda fully committed to legal threats before showing how empty they are. Let her hire expensive lawyers, file complaints, start litigation. The deeper she digs holes, the more spectacular falls become. David was drafting conservation easements, permanently protecting lakes while creating community access agreements. This way, Jake maintains ownership but guarantees reasonable use rights for current residents. Future buyers know exactly what they're getting. As sunset painted my lake, and reminders that it was literally my lake still gave thrills, I looked around this unlikely war council: property lawyer, environmental specialist, retired military prosecutor, brilliant daughter, network of neighbors finally finding someone willing, standing up to bullies, superior intelligence, better legal positioning, righteous anger from watching authority abuse by people never possessing that authority. Linda had no idea what was about to hit her, but she was about to learn that sometimes quiet neighbors you underestimate own everything you're trying to control. But before I tell you about Linda's spectacular self-destruction, Let me share what happened when she decided to get really creative with her harassment tactics. Linda's next move came with hand grenade subtlety. Actual lawsuit, not just threats, honest-to-God legal papers demanding boat removal, 5,000 damages, permanent injunctions preventing community disruption with oversized watercraft. Bradley Morrison had crafted masterpieces of legal fiction, making restored sea rays sound like floating garbage scows. The real kicker buried in page 4, adverse possession claims to the lake based on 30 years of continuous community use. Linda wasn't just regulating my boat, she was attempting legally stealing my lake through technicalities, making Wild West claim jumpers look honest. Emma found the filing online within hours. Dad, she's gone nuclear. This isn't harassment anymore. This is attempted theft of property worth probably $2 million. The morning after lawsuit arrival, I woke to sugar in my boat's fuel tank. Not enough destroying engines, but enough causing expensive damage if I'd started up. Sweet smell mixed with gasoline, nauseating combinations, reminding me of sabotage tactics from Bosnia. Phil's security camera caught shadowy figures near my dock around 2 a.m., but images too dark for positive identification. Still, body language looked familiar. Brad's nervous shuffle was distinctive, even in grainy night vision. This is escalating beyond property disputes, Sarah observed when I called with news. Vandalism changes everything. File police reports, document everything, consider this gifts. They're creating criminal evidence while we're preparing destroying their civil cases. Detective Morrison spent an hour photographing fuel tanks, collecting samples, taking statements, weary professionalism from seeing too many neighbor disputes turn ugly. But something about sugar tricks seemed piquing his interest. Funny thing about fuel sabotage, most people don't realize sugar dissolves in gasoline, creates syrups, gumming fuel lines and injectors. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. That afternoon, Linda escalated from vandalism to character assassination. She'd convinced Channel 9 to run stories about HOA fighting military intimidation, complete with dramatic footage of my boat shot, from angles making it look like destroyers threatening peaceful ponds. The reporter, ambitious kid named Blake Morrison, had bought Linda's narratives wholesale. Residents of this quiet lakefront community say they're living in fear of retaliation from former soldiers, refusing to follow basic guidelines. That breathless tone local news uses for missing cat stories. They interviewed Linda on her dock, wearing white sundresses, practically glowing against dark water. We're trying to maintain peaceful character, attracting us all to this special place. Wounded innocence worthy of Emmy Awards, if acting paid better than real estate. But Linda made crucial mistakes in media strategies. She kept referring to our community lake and shared waters in every interview. Each time using those phrases, she created evidence believing the lake was public property. Evidence looking pretty stupid when Jennifer revealed actual ownership situations. Emma monitored social media reactions, comment sections proving brutal. Half the viewers bought Linda's victim narratives, but others had dealt with similar HOA tyrants and were firmly in my camp. Look at this one, Dad. I hope this vet tells that HOA witch exactly where she can shove her boat regulations. These people have no idea what real problems look like. 3,000 likes. Phil stopped by, with intelligence making my day considerably more interesting. First, his contractor network discovered Brad's dock expansion permits were based on falsified property boundaries. He'd convinced the city his lot extended 10 feet further into the lake than actually did. Second, Linda had been shopping for lakefront property in Durango, big expensive spreads with private lake access and no HOA restrictions. The woman was planning exit strategies while simultaneously trying to destroy mine. She's panicking, Phil observed, settling into Walter's old rocker with beer. All this legal theater, media campaigns, vandalism, behavior of someone knowing they're losing control and not understanding why. That night, sitting on my dock, listening to gentle water lapping against pilings, watching lights flicker in houses around shorelines. Tomorrow, Linda would probably escalate again. More lawsuits, media interviews, maybe more sabotage. She was spiraling toward complete desperation, and desperate people make catastrophic mistakes. From strategic standpoints, I almost felt sorry for her. Linda had declared war without scouting battlefields, about to discover that sometimes quiet neighbors you underestimate hold all the cards you thought you were playing for. But what happened next was so outrageous, I'm still not sure I believe it myself. Linda's final desperate gambit came wrapped in official HOA letterhead and legal language screaming, "Hail Mary" passes from people already losing games. Emergency board meeting with hired stenographers, downtown lawyers, theatrical staging worthy of Broadway productions. The invitation arrived certified mail Friday, demanding my attendance at formal disciplinary hearings the following Tuesday. According to notices, I was charged with willful violation of community covenants, harassment of board members, and my personal favorite, conduct unbecoming a community resident. Emma laughed so hard, reading that last charge she nearly choked on coffee. Conduct unbecoming. What is this, court-martials? Did she seriously use military disciplinary language against actual veterans? But real comedy gold was buried in meeting agendas. Linda had invited City Councilman Patrick Hayes, County Commissioner Linda Rodriguez, and ambitious reporter Blake Morrison to witness her accountability demonstrations. She was planning publicly humiliating me in front of local officials and media, apparently unaware she was about to step on the biggest landmines in Colorado legal history. The bribery attempt came Sunday night, delivered by Linda's most loyal supporter, nervous real estate agent named Cheryl, who'd clearly drawn short straws for this mission. She knocked at 8 p.m., clutching envelopes and wearing expressions of someone forced to pet rattlesnakes. "Jake," she stammered, "Linda wanted me giving you this. Settlement offers. She's willing dropping everything if you agree docking your boat somewhere else. There's even money involved." Inside the envelope was cashier's check for $5,000 and pre-written agreements banning me from keeping watercraft over 20 feet on community waters. Documents also included non-disclosure clauses preventing me from discussing settlement negotiations with other residents. I looked at Cheryl, sweating despite cool mountain air. "Tell Linda I appreciate offers, but I'm afraid I can't accept." "She said you might say that," Cheryl's voice dropped to whispers. "She also said fighting City Hall never ends well for anyone." Interesting. Linda was threatening to use husband's connections, making my life difficult through official channels. Too bad she didn't realize threatening property owners with government retaliation creates whole different categories of legal problems. Monday brought news that Linda had convinced state environmental agencies to investigate potential lake contamination from boat fuel systems. Some anonymous tipster had reported suspicious odors and possible petroleum discharge from my dock areas. The inspector who showed up was a competent woman named Dr. Sarah Jamie, taking her job seriously and not appreciating time wasted on obvious vendettas. She spent 2 hours testing water samples, photographing boat fuel systems, documenting pristine conditions of everything examined. "Mr. Patterson," she said, packing testing equipment, "I've been doing this 15 years, and this is one of the cleanest private docks I've inspected. Whoever filed complaints was either grossly misinformed or deliberately malicious." Her reports would become official records. More evidence showing Linda's patterns of filing false complaints to harass people she couldn't control through legitimate means. Phil brought disturbing news that evening from contractor networks. Brad had been quietly soliciting bids for major dock modifications, requiring removing parts of my property's shoreline buffers. Plans showed boat lifts capable of handling 40-foot yachts, plus floating dock systems extending 50 feet into lakes. "The permits are fraudulent," Phil explained, spreading blueprints across kitchen tables. "They claim work happening on Chen property, but look at these coordinates. Half this construction would be on your land, and 30 feet extends over areas where Brad has no legal rights whatsoever." Betty arrived with turnovers and intelligence from networks of retired teachers who'd turned neighborhood watch into precision operations. Linda's been making phone calls to every contractor in 3 counties, trying to find someone willing to testify your boat is unsafe. When that didn't work, she started offering cash payments for expert opinions about navigation hazards. The patterns were clear. Linda had moved from harassment to fraud to bribery to environmental false reporting. She was systematically violating multiple state and federal laws while attempting to steal property worth millions, all because she couldn't accept someone had told her no. Tuesday morning dawned crisp and clear with crystalline mountain air, making everything seem sharper and more focused. I could hear Linda's voice drifting across water as she directed setup for her accountability demonstrations, positioning cameras and arranging chairs like prosecutors preparing for death penalty cases. What she didn't know was that Jennifer, Sarah, and David were already in place, armed with 40 years of legal documentation and property ownership revelations that would turn her theatrical performances into the most spectacular public humiliations in HOA history. Sounds of cars arriving at community centers, mixed with gentle water lapping against my docks on my lakes where Linda had been trespassing every time she came threatening me about violating regulations she had no authority to enforce. Time to show her exactly how badly she'd miscalculated. But what happened next was so beautifully orchestrated, it deserves its own chapter. The community center buzzed with electric tension, coming right before someone's world explodes spectacularly. Linda had transformed modest meeting rooms into personal courtrooms complete with stenographer tables, professional lighting for news cameras, folding chairs accommodating what looked like half the county. She'd positioned herself behind HOA board tables like judges, flanked by expensive lawyer Bradley Morrison and Brad, nervously adjusting ties. City Councilman Hayes sat front row with Commissioner Rodriguez, both wearing patient expressions of politicians fulfilling campaign promises they'd rather forget. The crowd was bigger than anyone expected. Word had spread through Phil's contractor networks, Betty's teacher mafias, Emma's social media campaigns. 43 people packed into rooms designed for 20, creating walls of witnesses, making Linda's humiliation absolutely unforgettable. I walked in at exactly 7 with Jennifer, Sarah, and David flanking me like legal equivalent of special forces. Jennifer carried leather briefcases containing 40 years of Walter's meticulously organized documentation, while Sarah had manila folders thick enough to choke horses. Linda's smile could have powered buildings. Mr. Patterson, thank you for finally joining us for this long overdue accountability session. Her voice carried syrupy condescension she used when thinking she held all cards. Blake Morrison positioned cameras for perfect angles, while Linda launched into prepared statements about community standards and shared responsibilities. She'd clearly rehearsed performances, gesturing dramatically toward enlarged photos of my boat, making it look like USS Missouri threatening fishing ponds. Ladies and gentlemen, Linda announced, realtor training evident in every practice gesture. We're here addressing situations threatening the very character of our peaceful lakefront communities. Mr. Patterson has repeatedly violated size restrictions, ignored aesthetic guidelines, and when confronted about reasonable concerns, responded with harassment and intimidation. Bradley Morrison stood presenting legal cases, complete with PowerPoint belonging in courtrooms rather than community centers, property values, navigation hazards, noise pollution complaints. He'd built impressive cases based on fundamental assumptions that Linda had any legal authority over lake activities. The defendant's vessel, Morrison intoned with courtroom gravitas, represents clear violations of established community standards governing shared water resources. We demand immediate removal, damages for community disruption, and permanent injunctions preventing similar violations. The audience shifted restlessly. This felt more like witch trials than neighborhood disputes, and several people were looking uncomfortable with Linda's prosecutorial theater. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, the way I'd learned commanding attention in Navy briefings, and nodded respectfully towards city officials and news cameras. Thank you, Councilman Hayes, Commissioner Rodriguez, members of the community. I appreciate everyone taking time from their evenings for this important discussion. Jennifer opened briefcases with theatrical precision, matching Linda's performances. However, before we discuss boat regulations, there's something everyone should know about this lake. Linda's smile flickered slightly, but she was too committed to scripts to stop now. Ms. Chen has spent considerable time discussing community standards for shared water resources, I continued, accepting thick folders from Jennifer. But there's a fundamental problem with her entire argument. The room went dead quiet except for Blake Morrison's camera capturing every moment. This lake isn't a shared resource. I unfolded David's color-coded survey maps, showing property boundaries in devastating detail. I own it. Every drop, every square inch of water, lake bed, and navigation rights. Silence so complete you could hear building ventilation systems. Linda's face went from confident pink to suspicious pale to horrified white in 3 seconds. What you're looking at, Jennifer announced, standing to address crowds like professors delivering lectures, is 40 years of legal documentation showing that Jake Patterson inherited complete ownership of this 47-acre lake from his great-uncle Walter Patterson. She held up original 1962 deeds, Walter's methodical property acquisitions, water rights certificates predating every house around shorelines. Every dock, every boat slip, every swimming area exists on Mr. Patterson's private property by his tolerance and permission. Linda found her voice, though it came out more like croaks. That's impossible. This is community water. We've been using it for 30 years. By grace and informal permission of Walter Patterson, Sarah interrupted with prosecutorial precision. Permission never legally granted and revocable at any time. Bradley Morrison looked like men who'd realized they'd been arguing malpractice cases. His expensive lawsuits weren't just wrong, they were spectacularly, embarrassingly, career-damagingly wrong. He was suing lake owners for using their own lakes. Blake Morrison's camera captured Linda's expression as implications sank in. Every regulation she'd tried enforcing, every threat she'd made, every violation notice she'd written, all based on authority she never possessed over property she didn't own. So, when you demanded I remove my boat from community waters, I said with calm satisfaction, coming from holding 4 aces, you were actually trespassing on my dock to threaten me about using my own lake. Commissioner Rodriguez leaned forward, political instincts recognizing disasters. Mr. Patterson, what exactly does this mean for the community? It means, I replied, looking directly at Linda's shocked face, that I could legally prohibit every boat, close every dock, and ban all water access by anyone other than myself. Today, right now, this very minute. Crowd's collective intake of breath sounded like wind rushing through pine trees. But I won't, I continued, watching relief flood through rooms, because unlike some people, I believe in being good neighbors. But here's the twist nobody saw coming, not even Linda. Linda's humiliation was complete, captured in high definition by Blake Morrison's cameras and witnessed by half the county. She'd declared war on someone owning everything she was trying to control, using authority she never possessed to regulate property belonging to her targets. The woman who'd spent months calling me troublemakers had just been revealed as people trespassing on private property to harass actual owners. Game, set, match. Community centers emptied with buzzes of people who'd witnessed something they'd talk about for years. Linda sat frozen at board tables, staring at Jennifer's legal documents like someone deciphering death certificates, while Bradley Morrison packed briefcases with movements screaming, career-ending malpractice lawsuits. Brad approached with nervous shuffles of men whose worlds had imploded. Jake, Linda always said, if we'd known. He couldn't finish sentences, probably calculating legal fees. Brad, we're neighbors, I said, offering hands. This doesn't have to destroy anyone willing to be reasonable. Linda resigned via email within 24 hours and had 4 sale signs planted faster than Phil could say, good riddance. Betty won emergency HOA elections with platforms of treating people like human beings instead of property violations, and her first acts were apologizing to me on behalf of communities. But real magic happened in what came next. The Walter Patterson Memorial Conservation Fund launched that spring, and watching Emma present first scholarships to environmental law students brought tears to my eyes. Uncle Walter's quiet genius was finally getting recognition it deserved, funding next generations, protecting places like our lake. Phil organized monthly cleanup days, turning into community celebrations. Families picnicking on shores, kids learning fishing from docks, couples watching sunsets from water. Exactly what Walter had envisioned, spending 40 years quietly protecting this piece of paradise. Annual veterans fishing tournaments became legendary, drawing participants from 5 states and raising thousands for veteran support programs. Scents of grilled burgers mixed with pine air every August, while old sailors shared stories and taught young ones proper casting. Jennifer's pro bono HOA clinic helped dozens of homeowners fight similar battles across Colorado. Her motto, borrowed from Navy days, became gospel for property owners. Know your rights before someone else pretends they own them. She kept Walter's story as Exhibit A in presentations about doing legal homework. Blake Morrison won regional journalism awards for follow-up series on community healing, and lakes became case studies in environmental law schools. Students visited every semester understanding how private ownership could protect public goods when guided by wisdom instead of greed. 6 months later, watching sunsets paint water gold when Emma called with news making Uncle Walter's legacy complete. The state had designated our lake as model conservation sites, permanently protecting it from development while maintaining community access. "Dad," she said, "you know what the best part is? Linda tried joining HOA boards in her new communities, but someone there had read news stories. They voted her down unanimously. Loons were calling across water that would never be threatened by petty tyrants again, their voices mixing with laughter from children swimming near Betty's docks. Evening air carried scents of barbecue smoke and contentment of communities that had learned to appreciate what they had instead of trying to control what they couldn't. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about building something so beautiful that people who try to destroy it become irrelevant footnotes in much better stories. Every evening I sit on my dock with coffee tasting like victory, watching families enjoy water that's been protected for 60 years and will be cherished for 60 more. Uncle Walter's quiet wisdom had created something Linda's petty authoritarianism never could. Real community based on respect instead of fear. That's what happens when bullies pick fights with people who know actual rules instead of made-up ones. What's your worst HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments below because we read every single one, and your nightmare might be featured in our next episode. Hit that subscribe button for weekly tales of neighborhood tyrants getting exactly what they deserve, and smash that notification bell because next week we're covering the HOA that tried to ban a disabled veteran service dog. Trust me, you won't believe how spectacularly that backfired. You've been watching HOA stories, where entitled neighbors get reality checks they desperately need. If this episode gave you second-hand rage or satisfaction, hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you're first in line for more weekly HOA chaos that'll make your blood boil and your justice boner thrive.